So what I would like to do is to actually go and set up a new project. And what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to use my React template to sort of go over that a little bit. And we're going to do a little bit of authentication. So we're going to have to set up some users, set up some passwords. You're going to see a little bit more of SQLize set up, which is good for the review. Remind me, I want to take a look at a many-to-many at some point, so we could just be aware of that one as well. But for the moment, what I would like to do is let me open up my browser here. And grab my repo. Okay, so I've got this React Redux template. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here. Yeah. So watch what you say. Oh, cursing. And I'm going to call this JWT demo. So JWT is a JavaScript web token, a way to encrypt data. And it's fairly simplistic. In fact, if you were to go online and do a search for JWT token, I think this site actually allows you to sort of play around with these tokens a little bit. So here's an example. You have this token that's here. Here's your data. And what happens here is that you have this payload. And what's happening is that we are verifying that this has been encoded with the string secret. If I were to go over here and change the encoding key, you'd see that this ends up breaking. So what ends up happening with this token is that token really is made up of three parts. Okay? Sort of think about this for a minute. The three parts say how it's encoded. The other part basically says, let me rephrase that. First part says how it's encrypted. Okay? Second part says, here is the data encoded, simple encoding. Okay? Encoding is not a way of basically trying to hide what it is. Encryption is. But it says, here's the data, it's encoded. Something that's encoded could be easily decoded. Third piece of information is basically an encryption of your data with some secret. Okay? So in other words, this token can go back and forth. That's not a big deal. But if you mess with it, we could find out that you ended up messing with it. So in other words, this is encoded with the string secret. And if I get back here, it'll say that the signature is verified. And I think there used to also be a way that you could actually encode it with something else. But maybe that could be another site that I'm thinking of. So in the end, what you want to keep secret is your secret. If someone has your secret, then they could pretty much do anything they want to, because then they could create a JWT token and basically say, hey, look, here's a different payload, and I know how to encrypt it, and you're not going to know whether it's a token that you sent me or not. Okay? So that's a little bit of the technology that we're going to take a look at. What I'm going to do here, let me go into this site, and let's also take a look at this. I'm going to do an rm.rf.git. I'm going to do git init. I'm going to do npm install. So this is basically a little bit of a souped up version of the template that I showed you last time. Because again, if you're writing React applications, you should have some way of creating an application in a fairly easy way, get up and running to test something out. Again, I'd like you to be able to code it from scratch, a simple app, or at least you could forget about it at some point. but I want you to understand what all the pieces are that exist. So at least a number of times to be able to create a simple site in React. But at this point, we sort of covered all the basics. If I go in here, I'm going to do npm run start dev. And I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to say localhost 3000. Okay? So now I've got actually around here, I've got products here. And actually notice that I've got the number 3 for 3 products. If I do this, that number ends up going down to 2. And, you know, there's a fairly decent amount of code here. I wouldn't say a ton, but let's open it up. Let's take a look at it. So a couple of things you could start out with. Again, I'm not going to look at the server side. We've looked at it a million times already. Let's start out by looking at, sometimes I tell you, hey, look, if you want to know about an application, go onto the server side and look at the models, okay? In a React application, if you want to know about what's going on, go look at the stores. See what kind of data you're going to have in your application. So what I have here, and this is a similar structure to what you see in Author, is that we've got a products reducer. They're very, very simple, okay? And I put everything in one file here. So in this file, I've got my constants. I've got a load products success that ends up setting, well, you would know that here. I've got an action creator, okay? I've got a thunk action here. I've got another thunk for destroying a product. I've got another action creator here. And I'm exporting destroy product and load products. And my products reducer is your sort of standard React, where if you end up coming into my reducer and you come in with the type of load product success, that's going to be the state. This state consists of a collection of products. And you can sort of see how this data is going to end up getting populated. It's going to get populated from the server. It's going to get populated with a GET request. And now if we go and we take a look at our store is pulling in our products reducer, okay? Because we need our products reducer. Our reducers determine what? What do our reducers determine in a React application? Your state. It's a combination of your reducers. You could only have one reducer if you want it, okay? But the reducer is needed for the store, and the store determines the state, okay? So in this case, I want to use my thunk middleware because I want to make calls to the server. And right off the bat, when this ends up loading, I end up basically dispatching to load products.
What you just said, you said the state. Repeat what you just said, what the reducer says and the store says.
Okay, so the store needs a reducer. Can't create a store without a reducer.
The reducer creates the state, the new state.
Yeah, but let's be a little bit, that's true. The reducer is responsible for creating the states, but you don't have any control over the reducer. You just create the store. Like reducers on their own do nothing, right? It's the fact that a reducer, it's the fact that a store has a reducer. And the store will literally go through and run the reducers to figure out its initial state. And then if there are any actions to the store will dispatch to the reducers, okay? Eventually they'll make it to the reducers. Again, middleware is a layer in between where we don't have our data yet, right? We're making an AJAX request, we're getting our data so that we can end up dispatching, really getting something to our reducer, all right? So in this case, we load our products while our app loads. Now the thing that's interesting about this is that if you look at the index page, this is nothing really earth-shattering. The only thing we're doing here, and this is again, we could do, if we wanted to, we could use Redux without React Redux. We could. But we're going to be constantly subscribing, unsubscribing, okay? what React Redux does is make it easy to, right, here's the keyword, makes it easy to do what to the store? Connect to the store, okay? And there are two things we want. There's one thing we want from the store, which is parts of the state. And there are things that we want to do to the store, which we end up doing with dispatch, right? That's why we have the map state to props and we have the map dispatch to props. So here we've got our store here. So now what this does is that in our application, and so here's a very, very simple container. Look at this. Nothing wrong with this. Here's my main app, and I wanted to put a products length in my nav. So I connect, right? I connect, I say what I care about are going to be the products from the state, right? I'm destructuring here. This gets past the state. I'm pulling the products from the state, okay? My products are here. That makes it available as a prop to go in here. By the way, dumb component here. Nothing going on here, no state that's going on here. This is being used to display some data, okay? So if any part of your app needs to know directly about the state of the store, you're going to be using this connect. I mean, if I'm in this app and I say, oh man, I got to know how many products are, you know what, I want to put the best selling product here, you know? Connect, right? Now when I go here to my products page, this could be a very, very, remember we were talking about this the other day, this could be very simple, okay? I could have a products form here if I wanted to, but I kept this pretty simplistic. Here's my product list, okay? And my product list needs products, but it also wants to have the ability to destroy a product. So I also map dispatch to props, okay? And I put this on, what's going to happen is that this destroy product is going to be a function that's going to be available as a prop. This function takes a product, and it's going to call dispatch destroy product. Okay? Destroy product, as you remember, right? You take a step back. Whenever you see these things being pulled in, and if they're being called with dispatch, they're probably going to be defined in a reducer. And this is our destroy product, right? Doesn't make any sense calling this, because then I would possibly be deleting a product, but I wouldn't be deleting it from the server, right? I want to make an AJAX call to do that. So you export what you need to export. And in this case, my products list page, all I care about are my products. Well, frankly, that's the only thing that's in my store right now, so there's nothing else to care about. We're going to add another reducer in a second. I've got my products here. Here's my destroy product where I'm dispatching. And what's kind of interesting here, this was another thing of basically saying, I could have put all this in here. You know, I could have put my list item and my button in here. You know what this allowed me to do? It allowed me to basically loop over each of the products. And this is kind of subtle, but what it allowed me to do is to then say, hey, look, you know what? I'm being passed destroy product, which takes a product. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, look, I want to pass into my product list item a property called destroy product, which wraps around destroy product. What that allows me to do is make this product list item component as dumb as it could possibly be. What do I mean as dumb as it could possibly be? On click, just call destroy product. I passed it into you. Don't think about it. There's nothing to think about. I passed you the method to call. Okay? I passed you the method to call, and I closed over. I bound. It's basically like I bound destroy product. Okay? I didn't have to call bind on it, but with closure, I wrapped around product. Okay? So in other words, you know, the dumber you can end up making these components, the easier things are going to end up turning out. Okay? This didn't get really any more complicated than it was before. but this became simpler. It's very obvious. You look at this thing and you go, all right, I don't know. I don't know what this method does, but obviously, when this button is clicked on, I'm calling some method that was passed in here, right? Becomes very clear what this stuff is. So now let's talk about how we could set up another reducer and how we might end up doing authentication, okay? And you know, it's not I try to think about the best steps to sort of show this. There's a sort of a bunch of moving parts that are going to be going on. We'll see maybe if we could end up testing some things out to make sure our server-side routes work. But just as a starting point, let's go over here and let's, you know, in the just because of time, let's actually go in here and I'm going to copy this products reducer. And I'm going to call it auth reducer. And what I'm going to do with this auth reducer, okay, this auth reducer is going to have a login success, and when I call login success, I'm going to pass to login success a user, and we'll say user over here, and this is going to be login success. So what we'll end up doing here is this is going to be our login command. Now this is one where it's obvious that we're going to need to send something in here, because when someone logs in, they're going to give us, again, we're not talking about Google authentication or anything like that. We're talking about logging in directly to our site. And what we're going to do here is we are going to go over here and we're going to pass in credentials. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a post to API. This doesn't exist yet. I'm going to call this session. Credentials are going to be nothing more than a username and password. Okay? I could take this out for the moment, let's go over here. And I'm going to make this, we'll say response.data. And we'll go over here and just say console.log data. Okay, so we're not going to have any of this stuff here. We're going to want to export login. All right, we're going to attempt to log in at some point. Now our reducer, I'm going to call it an auth reducer. And what I'll do with this auth reducer is I'll set up a state which is just an empty object. And when login success is called, I'm going to say, hey, look, my state, again, I don't want to mutate the state. So I'm going to do object assign, and I'm going to specify an empty object. I'm going to say state, and I'm going to say user is action.user. All right? Everyone knows I can't do user, just put user there, because I've got to do user, and what I'm going to assign to it is going to be action.user. So if I went back over here, here's our auth reducer. We're going to export our auth reducer, and we'll go over here and let's say that we're going to create our store. So we're going to need to import auth reducer from /auth reducer. This is how you end up combining reducers. And now when we combine reducers, we're going to call this auth reducer. Okay? So just to sort of see whether or not we could end up getting this to work, let's first make sure that we are building here. Looks like we are. Let's go in here and pretend that on our app page, we want to maybe show the logged in user if they're logged in. You've seen like a header where it says welcome so-and-so or log out or that sort of thing. So what I'm going to do up here is I'm going to go back to my app. And when I map state to props, I'm going to go over here. And when I map state to props, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say auth. Okay? But it's important to note, when you map state to props, totally up to you how you want to map it. Right? In this case, I wanted products. What I'm going to do here is say user is auth.user. Okay? And just as a starting point, what I'll do, that means that we could pass in user here. And that means that if I wanted to, I could go over here and do something like, hey, look, do you have a user? I'll say welcome. Otherwise, null. Right? If I did that now, nothing is going to show up here, but take a look. If I go back here and I go to my auth reducer, and I'm going to just screw around a little bit. Well, I could even do this, right? What if I went in here and I said, hey, look, let's call, well, no easy way to do it in here. Let's, in fact, just do this. Let's go and just set it up as initial state. I'll go in here and I'll put in user name is Mo. In which case, we should see welcome on here. In fact, if we went back here, if we have a user, we could always go up here and say welcome. If we have a user is going to have a name. User.name. Right? So what this, again, whenever you're doing a React application, React Redux in particular, you're thinking about your state. Okay? Now, obviously, a user's not going to be logged in right off the bat. So we've got to figure out a way to get a user into our system. So let's start out with that. And what we're going to do is that we're going to set up we're going to pull in a library, npm install JWT simple. And we're going to save. And what we'll end up doing here is let's go to our routes. We'll just do a little testing here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a couple of routes. Again, this would probably be broken out into separate files, but I'm going to just start, just to test this out. I'm going to say API session. And what I'm going to do here is say request, response, next. Before I do that, let's do something really simplistic so we actually have users in our system. So let's go back to our DB here. And not only will we have a product, but let's actually put in a user. User will have a name and a password. Thank you. So user will have a name and a password, and we'll keep this kind of silly. We'll say users equals Mo, Larry, and Curly. And we'll actually go over here and we'll say user promises equals users.map. And here we're going to get a name, but we're also going to get an index too. And we'll just say user.create. And we'll say the name is just going to be the name, but we'll say the password, just to keep it interesting, is going to be the products IDX. So now we've got, let's call it users promise. And here we'll just say promises.all concat users promise. I don't like that. Let's be consistent. Let's say product promises, and we'll say const user promises. And we will concat them by saying product promises concat user promises. And let's just see if that ends up running, which we would find out if we went back here. So I've got a line 10.
No, 18.
Ah, thank you. Okay, so it looks like it's inserting my users with their correct password. Mo is foo, Larry is bar, and Curly is Baz. Okay? So now, once we have that, just to do a little bit of testing, just to show you what this is going to look like, let's go into our routes. And I'm just going to do this. We're going to play around with these routes a little bit to make them a bit more restful. But let's go over here, and we'll start out by saying models dot, let's say find by ID. We'll just do 1. Okay? So this is going to be Mo. And we'll go over here, we'll do a then. We're going to have a user. Let's say response.send user, just to see that we have a user. And we'll do a catch next. So if we go back here, assuming that there's no errors, and we go over here and we say API session cannot get API session.
Maybe not the API.
That's right. That's what I was hoping someone would notice it. I was hoping someone would notice it. Okay? So if we do that, right, it's not models find by ID. It's models.user find by ID. And let's just make sure, I think we did, but make sure we exported that, which I didn't. Right? Now if we go back here, we've got Mo. Okay? Very good. Well, what we're actually going to do with Mo is I'm going to take Mo, and I'm assuming, what I want to test out is, let's say someone logs in as Mo. I'm going to go over here and bring in JWT equals required JWT simple. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come up here, and after I find Mo, what I'm going to do is instead of sending back the user, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a token. And the way that I'm going to create a token is to say JWT encode. Well, what do I want it to encode? Whatever I really want to go down to the client, I can encode, but the only thing that I really want to save on the client is the user's ID. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say the ID is going to be the user ID. When you encode, you have to give a key that should be a secret. So what I'm going to do up here, just for sake of argument, I'm going to say const secret equals process environment secret or foo, right? Obviously, it would be pretty bad if you didn't set up a secret on your server. We could make sure that that happens, but for the moment, let's just go over here and we'll say secret. Now, what we should end up getting from this is going to be our token. So we'll go over here. In fact, let's do it in a couple of different steps. I'm going to encode. That's going to be my secret. And then when I get that, this will be my token. And I'll say response.send token. Let's just see what we get. After argument list, so there you go. And not that. Okay,
So JWT code is.
that's exactly right. So let's.
Setting the right parameters, it's going to give you.
So that's our token. Okay, and if someone broke apart this token, by the way, they'd find that ID. That's not a secret. Okay, but there's a second part to that that basically encrypts the ID. That means if you got this token, you could pretend that you're Mo. But the idea is you shouldn't be able to get the token. But you can't pretend you're somebody else. I can't go in and change the ID because if I went back to the server, I wouldn't be able to unencode it. Now, let's actually test that out. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to go over here. Let me change this. I'm going to call this session create for the moment. So I don't feel like setting up Postman to do a post. So I'm going to say session create, and I'll get the same value. Okay? Now what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to do another get. And when I do a get here, this is really going to be where I end up getting my session. And the way that I'm going to get my session is that I'm going to pass in my token. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say, hey, JWT decode. What do you want to decode? Request params.token. What's your secret? My secret is my secret. Now, if this is able to decode, it's good. If you can't decode, what happens is that this throws an exception. No promise or anything like that, it just blows up. Okay? And if this blows up, let's do a catch. And we'll go over here and we'll say response.send status, let's say 500. And what we'll do over here is when we end up decoding, what we'll do, this will be our token. Okay? And for the moment, let's just say response dot send user is, I'm going to take this out, so I'm not do this quickly. User is token ID. Okay? What this means is that if I have a token here, and I take this token, and I go over here, and I say localhost API, localhost 3000, API session, and I put that token in there, I should get user is 1. Okay? So what I really want to do here is when that token ends up coming back, well, pretty simply, user.find by ID, token ID, then user. And we've got to just take into consideration that it's possible that we won't end up finding the user. And if we can't end up finding the user, what we'll do is we'll say, if not user, let's say, what is unauthorized? Unauthorized is 401. Do you know? 403?
401.
What's not found? 404? So 401, let's go over here and we'll say, if not user, response.send status 401. Okay, and let's get out of there. And if in fact we were able to get down this far, let's say response.send, and we'll send back the user. Okay? So that means, and again, let me just do models.user. And what we'll do over here is now if we rerun this, we'll get Mo back. Okay? On the same token, if I went over here, let's actually do it a little bit differently here. When I say session create,
Did you say you wanted to set up Postman in order to do a post?
yeah.
So you can't do a post just.
In my browser? Tell me how.
Well, you have to create a form.
Right.
Yeah,
You
that's
just
a-
didn't want that stuff.
Right.
Oh, I get it.
So here, what I'm going to do, let's actually set this up. And the way that we're going to set this up, we could do Postman really fast. It's fine. Let's go over here. We'll actually set this up as a post. So how are we going to do this? Well, we're going to say models.user find one. And we'll say where. We'll say name request.body.name password request.body.password. And if we can end up finding one, we'll go over here, we'll do a then. We'll say user. Again, we'll put this on a couple of different lines here. So if in fact we have a user, what we're going to do is we're going to send back our token. So our token is going to be token equals JWT encode ID user ID. We encode it with our secret. We'll say return response.send, and this is going to be token. Just do token. Otherwise, if we didn't find the user, we're going to say return response.send status 401. And if in fact we make it down here, let's do a catch and next. Let's actually try to test it out with Postman. It shouldn't be that hard to do. Dot catch, thank you. Make sure we don't have any other errors. So here, probably missing a find one is going to be an object. Okay, so let's actually open up Postman. Do I have Postman on here? I think I did. If not, I'm going to get it. Oh, yeah, I should have it. Postman, okay. So what Postman's going to do is going to let me make a request. Start out with our products, see if we get them. Do I really have to do that? Okay, so this is going to be, let's start out by doing localhost 3000. Let's do the easy one, API products. Okay, looks good, right? Let's now set this up so that we're going to do a post to session. Set it up as a post. And for our body, we're going to set this up to be JSON data. Let's just say we could do raw here. Here we could say this is going to be JSON data. And what we'll do over here, we'll say that name is equal to Mo. And we'll say password is equal to foo. And let's do a post on this. Thank you. And we get back a token. And let's take that token, go over here. Let's do a get request, API session. I'm getting the existing session, putting in the token, and I get Mo, right? On the same token, just to make sure we're not always going to get Mo, let's say Larry and your bar. We could probably see we'll get a different token back. So here, and there's Larry. By the way, if you looked at this and you said, it's the same token, man, I see the first 3 letters or EY or whatever. But that could just be the part that's saying the method that it's using to do the encryption with, right? So now we're sort of on our way with this. So how are we going to test it out? Well, let's create a component. What we'll do is on our app page, what we're going to do here is let's create a link. It's not going to be so fine-tuned, but it'd be good enough. We're going to log in to login, and right now this doesn't exist. But when we go to login, what we're going to do is we're going to set up on our index page another route, and this is going to be for login. And this is going to be for our login page. And over here, we'll say import login from /login. It's called login page, be consistent. And eventually, this is going to be set up so you're going to have different folders for your things, similar to what's done in Auth. So if we go over here, I'm going to create, let me try to run out of battery power here. How do I make this go away? All right. So this is going to be login page.js. And here, somewhere along the lines, we've got to have a smart component because we're going to have a form. We're going to have a username. We're going to have a password. Okay? So I'm going to say import React component from React. And I'll say class login page extends component. I'm going to have a constructor because this is where my state is going to get set up. Again, this state, keep in mind, this is not Redux store state. This is basically just the state for this component. So in this component, I'm going to call super. And I'll say this dot state equals name, password. I'll have a render. And what we'll do over here is we'll return, this is going to be a form. We'll do a form group. Input class name is form control. And we'll do one here. We'll do another here. Let's even this out a little bit. And we'll say export default login page. That seemed to build. Let's go back to our browser. And if we do login, we get to this login page. Okay? So let's start setting this up. We're going to have a value here is equal to this state name. We're going to have a value here of this state password. If you wanted to, you could put a placeholder in here. See if that works. So there's name. Let's go back here. Go over here. We'll do a placeholder. And we want to set it up. Right now, if we went back, we got a problem because the way that React is, once you end up using state on things, you can't change it. So we'll do a couple of very simple things here. This on name change. We'll have a this on name change. Doesn't exist yet. Bind this. And we'll go over here and we'll say this on password change. On password change. And we'll have two things here. We'll have name change, which takes an event. And we'll simply say this dot set state name event dot target dot value. On the same token, we're going to have a on password change. There's no prevent default here. There's no default thing that happens when you change a text box. So we'll do this dot set state password, and now let's go over here and put in our on change. On change. This is going to be this on name change. On change here. This dot on password change. Okay. So let's go make sure now we can type into the text box. Sometimes it's a little bit slow. So that works. Let's put a submit button in and talk about what we're going to do with it. So we'll do a button, btn, class name, btn, we'll do btn primary. By default, if you have a button inside of a form, it'll submit the form. We'll say submit. You could probably prove that. Let's say login. What should happen is that if we type in here, we should see it ends up going up here. Oh, you know why actually you don't see anything on the URL bar. If you were to go and do this, name equals name. Not that you really have to do that, but if you had a label, you might. So here, if we do this again, here you'll see it definitely did a post, which we don't want. So what do we want to do here? Let's do this on login equals this on login, bind this. And for starters, let's say on login, EV, and here is where we would do our EV prevent default. And we'll go over here and we'll just say console.log this.state, which our state is really going to be what? Our credentials. And now in our form, we could say on submit equals, and this is going to be this on login. Let's see if that works. Let's open up our console here. So if I do this, and I do this, and I go over here, I should see my name and password. Now, what we really want to do here is we want to actually log in through the method that we actually want to call is in our reducer, right? The method that we want to call is going to be in our auth reducer, and it's going to be this code with our credentials. So what we can end up doing here is that if we go back to our auth, our login page, what we could end up doing here is connecting, right? If we say import login from /auth reducer. Let me just make sure I exported it. So here's our auth reducer, and we're exporting it. Good. Okay. So we go back over here to our login page, and we've got our login. And what do we want to do? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to map dispatch. Let's do a const. Map dispatch to props. This is going to be dispatch. And again, if you want to do simple syntax here, This just returns an object, and we can put our object in here, and our action that we want to call on our props is going to be login. When we call it, we're going to pass in some credentials. We're going to use those credentials to dispatch to login with our credentials. Now again, what's happening is that we're making our component dumber. Okay? We're passing it in a function that's going to get called. And what we're doing is we are wrapping around. We're going to wrap around. This is going to be our action that we ended up exporting. We're going to dispatch it. Okay? Middleware is going to end up kicking in. Okay? And right now, we're actually not going to go to any action. But one of the things that we should be able to see, if we're able to get this to work, is first of all, let's connect it. So I need to import connect from React Redux. And so now I could go over here, connect. There's no map state to props, so I just say null. Map dispatch to props. And then this gives me a function where I then am connecting. And now if I go up here, I should be able to bring in into my constructor login. If I want to, I could just see it by saying console.log login. All right, this is a method that I want to call, and I'm going to want to call it down here with my state. I go to run this. Here's my login method that ended up getting passed in here. In fact, frankly, I don't even need to put it here. I could put it here, okay? But what I'm going to do is just go over here, and when I end up going to submit this, I'll go over here and I'll say this. I'm going to say login, and I'm going to log in with the state. And what I should see here on the right, if I look at my network tab, if I go over here and I say mo xyz, try this one more time. Oh, not login. This dot props login. And I go mo. Okay, I'll get a 401. If I go over here and I say mo foo login, I'll get my token. Okay? All right. So question is, what do we really want to do after that? But before we do it, let's make this a little bit dumber. I don't like this. I don't like all this floating around in here. Okay? Too much going on. What I would rather do is do something like this. I'm going to have some, I'll call it login form. What do I need to pass to login form? I'm going to pass to login form a login method. What is that login method going to look like? Yeah, hold on. Let me just think about this for a sec. So when I call login, I'm going to call, all right, I'm going to do it this way. I'll do login form, and I'll say on login equals this on login. Let's try this. What else are we going to have to pass in here? Well, let's pass in our name, this.state.name. Let's pass in a password, this.state.password. Let's pass in on name change, right? We could actually pull it from here. we're going to say, yeah, on name change equals this dot on name change. On password change equals this on password change. And what this is going to give us the ability to do is to come down here and create a DOM component. We'll say const login form. And we're going to pass it some stuff. We'll go down here. So now we're going to be able to get rid of a lot of the this. We'll say we're going to pass in, what do we call it down here? We'll pass in, we'll just do this. We'll say on login, call this on login, name, password on name change. So this allows us to go over here and specify that we've got a login, we've got a name, we've got a password, we've got an on name change, we've got an on password change. So then this becomes a little bit simpler here where we just pass in name. We go over here and this is going to be just on name change, no this. On password change, this is just going to be password. And on submitting the form, we will call login. Don't forget, login is assigned to this on login, in which case, just if we wanted to see if this is going to work, let's say console.log this.state again. And we've got our state, and let's actually test that we could log in. So we'll say mo foo, and we'll see that we end up getting this token back. We're seeing that for our auth reducer. The next question is, now we've got a little bit of a simpler form here. So what we could actually do here, actually, maybe we make this a little bit simpler. On login. No, that's simple enough. Right? This way we just say submit on login. Yeah, all right. Makes this a little bit simpler. So what we're going to do here is now we've got to decide what we're going to do. So there's a couple of things we could do. One of the things we want to do is we want to basically, we don't want to have the user have to log in every time that they end up reloading the browser. So what we're going to do is that when we end up going over to our auth reducer, and we get down here, and we're successful, we're going to say local storage set item token, and this is going to be data.token. So local storage allows us to set data locally for this website. Let's actually just test it out and see if it's going to work. Here's our application. And I've got this here ready because I was messing with this before. But let me get rid of that. And I'm going to say mo foo. And if I go back here and I look at local storage, thank you. Local store, not local store, local storage. Thank you. So I'll go over here, foo, excuse me, mo foo. One more time, sometimes takes a second, mo foo. And now if I go back to my network tab, excuse me, application, local storage set item. Looks like we're going there. Let's try one more time. No. I thought you did, but I don't think you do. Let's make sure that this is being set. Local storage set item, token data.token. Let's try it one more time. Unless I'm reading something wrong here. Let's just go over here, make sure we do have the token. I'm going to say console.log. Oh, yeah, that should be right. Data.token. Let's see. Console. You know what? I bet you I have an error here. No. Mo. Foo. All right. Application. That's strange. No errors.
Is that case sensitive?
Yeah, but I think this is the correct case.
On the screen, it's capital.
Yeah, but that's just what they call local storage. That's just a title for it.
I wasn't sure that was very.
Let's see. Huh?
Can I put a break point
Nah. Let's do this. Console.log local storage. Yeah.
Storage.
Local store. Thank you. Local storage. Mo. Foo. It's a function. Set item. Am I using it incorrectly? Local storage.
Key value pair.
Yeah, isn't that what I'm doing? No?
Storage. It said storage.
Yeah, they're calling it storage there, but they're alluding to local storage. So let me see one thing. I don't know. Maybe if it's just not showing up. I'm gonna do console.log local storage get item token. I don't know why my Chrome doesn't seem to be working, but that's a guess. Let's try this. Make sure I reloaded. We're gonna. Thank you. We're going to go over here. We're going to say mo, foo. It's there. I don't know. I'm not sure what's happening here. Yeah, I don't know what the... It's in there.
Is that a different URL?
Yeah, I don't think that would make a difference, but let's see. I mean, maybe. That was when the form got submitted. It just keeps on refreshing it. Let's try one more time. Well, it's there, so I'm not too worried about it. Now the question is now, what do I want to do with this? Well, so I've actually set this token. So one thing that I could do is now let me go and actually have another dispatch. I'm going to call this me, and I'll show you why in a second. So I'm going to call this me. I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm just going to keep this internal for a moment. And when I call me, and I go to dispatch, what I'll do is I'll say, hey, look, if I'm going to say token equals local storage get item token. And you know what? If for some reason we don't have a token, just get out of there. There's nothing to do. Okay? But if we do have a token, let's go in here. And we'll go over here and we'll get our session. And I'm going to go over here and use this. And this is going to be, we'll make this token. There's nothing to send. It's just going to be a GET request. I end up getting my data back here. And let's be positive that we'll end up getting a user. And so after I end up getting my data back, what I'm going to end up doing is that when I end up calling this, and again, I'm going to end up calling this and passing dispatch in, what I'll end up doing is when I end up getting my data, which is going to be my user, at this point, I'll say dispatch login success user. Okay? Now, let's see what that does. Let's actually do a couple of other things here. This is our dispatcher. So when this, after we end up setting this, what we're going to end up doing here is we're actually just going to call. It's perfectly legitimate to do this. We're going to say we've got dispatch. So we're going to say me. Let's try to think about the best way to do this. I'm going to cheat a little bit. And I'll go over here and I'm going to say me dispatch. And I'm going to get a function back. And I'm going to end up calling that function. Let's just see if this works. Now, if this does work, what I should be able to do, and let's get rid of this user here. We'll make this just an object. Let's reload this. So we shouldn't see any welcome. And we'll say mo foo. Dispatch is not a function. Let's figure out why. Me. We're passing in dispatch. Oh, let's just do this. We're going to have to figure out a better way to do this, but bear with me a moment. You know, let's worry about, I'm going to have to refactor this later on, so let's do this. Let's go in here, and once we get in here, we'll actually keep this in one thing. So we're going to do this with our token. I'll go over here. I'll put in data.token. Let's not worry about this me part for the moment. Let's be optimistic that this is going to work. When we go down here, we're going to get a response. Let's say response.data. Let's do it then. We'll do a user. And at this point, I know we have a dispatch, and we'll say dispatch. And this is going to be login success. With this user. Let's give that a shot. All right. So here is our token. We're going to use our token. We'll do this. We're going to dispatch login success. Let's give it a shot and see if it works. So we go over here. We say mo, foo. And we're logged in as mo, right? If I say Larry, bar, we're logged in as Larry, okay? But if I refresh, I'm logged in as nobody. So let's actually do something. Again, it's not going to be that dry, but let's go over here and let's do a const, and this is going to be me, and this is just going to be a regular Axios call. And we'll go over here. And what we'll do over here, so here we're going to have a dispatch, and we'll basically do our thing here. We'll say token equals local storage get item token. And we'll say, look, if you don't have a token, just get out of there. Nothing to do. If you do, we'll use our get. In fact, let me just come over here and pull this.
You need a not
Thank you. So we'll go over here. We'll use our token. And we'll do the same thing that we're doing over here, which is, and now, we've got this. Let's get rid of this. So if we're able to get the user, we're going to then log in success with that user, right? This is a function that we're returning. And let's also export me. Why do we want to do that? So that when we go into our store, we could end up importing not only auth reducer, but me. And say store.dispatch me. It's going to look for the token. If it finds the token, it's going to log the user in. And what this should end up doing is giving us persistent storage. We want to log the user out. We could just get rid of the token. If I had this working over here, which I don't, I could do that. Local storage, I don't think it does. Session storage does. But if I opened up a new, let's go over here. Let's do a new incognito window. I'll be logged out. And if I go over here and I say Mo Larry Curly, Baz, now we're logged in as Curly. We're still back here. And again, persisted. Go back here. What's a very interesting thing, what you just learned? Authentication without session, without cookies. Okay? So we'll look at this a little bit more. Again, this was something that I wanted to sort of throw at you so you see this. You've seen also a little bit more React and Redux. I'm going to stop this recording, and I want to do a couple of other things.